All right, ready to dive in. Today we're tackling nudge. This book is all about making smarter choices, even when, let's face it, our brains aren't always on board.
Oh, I know that feeling all too well.
You ever find yourself reaching for that extra cookie, even though you know you'll regret it later? Nudge goes right to the heart of those moments where good intentions meet real-world temptations.
That's a daily struggle.
So tell us about the minds behind this book.
Well, you've got Richard Thaler, a behavioral economist, and Cass Sunstein, a legal scholar. And they have this really interesting way of explaining why we do the things we do. It's what they call choice architecture.
Choice architecture. Okay, so what's that all about?
Basically, it's about how the way choices are presented to us, how they're framed, actually influences what we decide.
So it's not just about willpower then. It's about the whole setup, the context of the decision.
Exactly.
That's already got me thinking. So does nudge just point out the problem, or does it offer some solutions too?
Oh, it definitely offers solutions. The book introduces this idea of nudges, which are these subtle ways to guide people towards making better choices, but without taking away their freedom to choose.
Ooh, I like that. A little nudge in the right direction. But, well, like, how does that actually work? Give me a real-world example.
Okay, picture this. You're at a cafeteria and they put the fruit like right at eye level, so it's the first thing you see.
Okay, I'm with you.
You're still totally free to choose anything you want, but that placement, it just makes you more likely to grab an apple instead of going for those cookies hidden away on a lower shelf.
Sneaky, but I can see how that would work.
Yeah,
So it's not about forcing anyone. It's just about making the healthier choice, well, the easier choice.
exactly.
That's pretty clever.
And that's just one example. Nudge is packed with all sorts of fascinating nudges, from the way they design retirement savings plans to how organ donation programs are structured.
Wow, so nudges can be used for all sorts of things, big and small. But is there, like, a science behind it all? Why are we so susceptible to these little influences?
Well, the book gets into the psychology of it all. Turns out we have two systems of thinking, what they call the automatic system and the reflective system.
Okay, two systems go on.
So the automatic system is all about instinct. You know, those quick decisions, like grabbing that cookie without even thinking.
That sounds a lot like me at the grocery store. My automatic system seems to have a serious sweet tooth.
I can relate. And that's where the reflective system comes in. This is the part of our brain that thinks things through, weighs the pros and cons, but it takes more effort, and sometimes we're just not in the mood to think too hard.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when I'm faced with, like, a million options on a menu or trying to pick a health insurance plan. Ugh, my brain just wants to shut down.
Right. And the book gives this really interesting example about how people assess their risk of having a stroke.
Okay, stroke risk. How does that fit in?
If they don't personally know anyone who's had one, they just automatically assume their own risk is low, even if statistically that might not be accurate.
Interesting. So our brains are basically taking shortcuts all the time, relying on gut feelings and past experiences, which isn't always the best strategy for making smart choices.
You got it. And that's where nudges can be so powerful because they help us bridge that gap between what we want to do and what we actually do, especially when our automatic system is calling the shots.
This is all making so much sense now. So if our brains are wired for these shortcuts, how do we actually use nudges to our advantage? Can you give me an example that goes beyond rearranging the cafeteria?
Of course. One of the most powerful nudges out there is the concept of defaults. Think about it. When you set up a new phone, it usually comes with certain apps already installed. Those are default.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
You can always delete them, but most people, they just stick with what's already there.
Yeah, I'm definitely guilty of that. It's easier to go with the flow than to make the effort to change things.
Exactly. Inertia is powerful. And nudge shows how this principle of defaults can be used for so many things, like automatic enrollment in retirement savings plans. Way more people participate when they're automatically opted in, unless they actively choose to opt out.
So it's like nudging people towards a better future by making it the path of least resistance.
Exactly. Make the desirable choice the default choice, the one that requires the least effort. And it can really make a big difference.
Okay, now I'm starting to see how this all fits together. We've got the quirky brains that love taking shortcuts, and then nudges come in and use that knowledge to steer us towards better choices. It's like a clever little dance between psychology and design.
You got it. Before we jump into the next topic, any other thoughts on defaults? It's such a simple idea, but so powerful,
Yeah, actually, I've been thinking about all the defaults I encounter every day without even realizing it, like my email program. It automatically filters out spam.
Oh, good point.
That's a huge time saver. I guess you could say I'm being nudged toward a cleaner inbox right now.
That's a great example. It shows how these nudges are kind of woven into our daily lives. But let's zoom out a bit. Let's look at how nudges are tackling some bigger challenges.
Big picture thinking. I'm ready.
One area where nudges have really made a difference is in encouraging healthier eating habits. Nudge talks about this study where simply rearranging a cafeteria, like the layout, led to some pretty big changes in what people chose to eat.
Wait, really? Just by, like, moving things around? I'm picturing a giant game of Tetris with salad bars and pizza stations.
Haha, not far off. They basically moved the healthier options, like fruits and veggies, closer to the entrance, made them more visible. And the less healthy stuff, they put it further away or in less prominent spots.
Okay, so it's like that supermarket strategy we talked about, just applied to a cafeteria. But did it actually work? I mean, did people really change their eating habits just because of where the food was placed?
The results were actually pretty amazing. People were way more likely to go for the healthier options when they were right there, easy to grab. It's like our brains are programmed to go for what's right in front of us, especially when we're hungry and in a hurry.
That is incredible. Such a small change, but big impact. It makes you wonder what other little tweaks could lead to positive changes.
Right. That's what's so exciting about nudges. They're often these small, inexpensive changes, but the impact on behavior can be huge. Another fascinating example from Nudge is how they use social norms to encourage people to conserve energy.
Okay, social norms and energy conservation. I'm intrigued. How did they pull that off?
It all comes down to the fact that people are really influenced by what they think is normal behavior. So they send out these energy bills, right? But they included info about the average energy use in the neighborhood.
Ah, I see. So it's like a little dose of peer pressure, but for a good cause. Keep up with the Joneses, but make it eco-friendly.
Exactly. And it totally worked. People who were using more energy than their neighbors, they tended to cut back. And the folks who were already using less energy than average, they kept up the good work.
That's amazing. It's like we're all secretly influenced by what our neighbors are doing, even when it comes to how much electricity we use.
It's a powerful force. And Nudge also explores how social norms can be used to boost charitable giving.
Well, that makes sense.
Studies have shown that people are more likely to donate when they see that others are doing it too, especially if it's people they admire or connect with.
Right, so it's about building a culture of giving, where generosity becomes the norm. It's like, be the change you want to see in the world, but with a nudge twist.
I like that. It's about using social influence to spark a ripple effect of positive behavior. And you can apply this idea to all sorts of things, from voter turnout to recycling.
This is all so fascinating. It seems like nudges are this secret weapon for positive change, quietly working behind the scenes. But I have to ask, are there any downsides to all this nudging?
That's a really good question, and one that Nudge addresses head on.
Yeah, I mean, if we can be so easily influenced by these subtle cues, couldn't they be used for not so great purposes too? Like tricking people into buying stuff they don't need?
Some critics do argue that even well-intentioned nudges can feel manipulative in a way.
Right.
But Nudge really emphasizes transparency. People should know that nudges are being used, and they should understand the goal behind them.
So it's not about tricking people. It's about using what we know about human behavior to design choices that are truly in people's best interest.
Exactly. The goal is to help people make choices that improve their lives and the lives of others, not to manipulate them.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. So it's like a partnership between the folks designing the nudges and the folks being nudged, built on trust and transparency.
You got it. Nudge actually lays out some guidelines for ethical nudging. Things like nudges should be transparent, easy to opt out of, and they should be used to promote well-being.
So it's about finding that sweet spot, guiding people towards good outcomes while still respecting their freedom to choose. It's a delicate balance.
It is, and Nudge acknowledges that, there's this ongoing debate about the ethics of influencing behavior, even when it's for a good cause.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation about nudge so far. We've talked about all those clever nudges, from defaults to social norms. Now I'm ready to get down to business. How can we actually use these nudges in our own lives?
That's the question, isn't it? And Nudge gives us some really practical advice for becoming our own choice architects.
Okay, choice architects, I like it. So where do we start?
It all begins with knowing yourself, understanding your own biases and tendencies, like what are your weaknesses, what trips you up.
Self-awareness is key. But are there any common biases that we should all be on the lookout for?
Definitely. One is something called loss aversion. It turns out we're way more motivated to avoid losing something than we are to gain something of equal value.
Okay, loss aversion. Go on.
Think about it. Losing $10 feels way worse than finding $10 feels good, right?
Oh, that's so true. It explains why I agonize over every purchase, even for little things. Like I'm more afraid of spending money than excited about getting something new.
Exactly. And Nudge says, use that to your advantage.
Okay, how?
If you're trying to save money, frame it as avoiding a loss. Instead of focusing on how much interest you'll earn, think about how much you'll lose if you don't save.
Ooh, that's a good one. Turning saving into a way to avoid pain rather than a distant reward. What other biases can we use to, nudge ourselves in the right direction?
Another big one is what they call present bias. That's our tendency to choose immediate gratification over long-term benefits. It's why we go for that extra slice of cake even though we know it's not the best for us.
Oh, my present self and future self are constantly at war, and my present self usually wins, armed with a fork and a plate of cookies.
I feel ya. But Nudge says, try to make those long-term benefits feel more tangible, more immediate.
So, like, rewarding myself now for making healthy choices, like a little treat for my present self.
Exactly. If you're trying to get in shape, don't just focus on some abstract goal of being healthier in the future. Find a way to reward yourself now for making healthy choices today.
I can get behind that kind of nudge. So we've got loss aversion, present bias. What else?
Well, there's also the status quo bias. That's our tendency to just stick with what's familiar, even if it's not the best choice. Like, how long have you had the same phone plan? Same internet provider?
Oh gosh, way too long. I hate dealing with change. Even if it means saving money, it's like I'm stuck in a rut.
But Nudge has a solution for that, too.
Okay, call me.
Regularly review your choices. Make it super easy to switch to better options. You could set reminders, like every 6 months, to compare phone plans or look into different internet providers.
So it's like giving ourselves a nudge to reevaluate.
Exactly. Take control of your choices. Don't just passively accept what's always been there.
I'm loving this. This whole deep dive into nudge has been such a game changer. I feel like I have this new understanding of how my brain works and how I can use that to make better choices.
That's the goal. Take these fascinating ideas from behavioral economics and put them into practice.
So as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought. The power of nudges is real, but it's up to us to use it wisely. We can nudge ourselves toward a better future, one little choice at a time.
Well said. Even the smallest nudge can set off a ripple effect, and that can lead to big positive changes, not just in our own lives, but for others too. Thanks for joining us on this amazing exploration of nudge.
Keep on nudging, everyone.